Good evening. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and thank you for joining me on another edition of Technology Access Television. Well, if you haven't looked at your business plan in a while, and if you've been out there fighting the good fight, trying to win customers and influence people, you have to sometimes reconsider your marketing strategy. Yes, you do. I know it's a hard pill to swallow, but you know, this marketing landscape is changing all the time. So if you haven't reconsidered your value proposition, much less your media strategy, now's a good time, and my guest is a good person to give us some advice and counsel on how we rethink our marketing proposition. Yes, this is critically important to businesses of all sizes, and fortunately, some people have been thinking about this changing landscape and how to take advantage of it with some new ideas and new concepts that might just put you at the right place at the right time with the right customer segment that'll suit your needs. My guest today is Jack Trytten, and Jack, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.
And Jack, you have a very wonderful marketing background, but more importantly, you've actually taken the time to step back a little bit from the marketing trenches and think about some of these things. You've written a couple of books. What's the name of your new book?
The G Point, How to Turn Your Company into a Growth Machine.
Well, boy, that's a good title. A lot of us would love how to figure out how to turn our company into a growth machine. But when you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be an author of these wonderful marketing texts.
Well, I started out consulting a marketing strategy in the 80s and ran into some challenges that took us off in a different direction. We got very involved in some marketing research and some very unusual marketing research, which gave us remarkable insights into how people act in the marketplace, why consumers purchase what they purchase, and it worked not only in the consumer marketplace but in the business-to-business marketplace. In the late 90s, my group went out on our own, started our own company, and started working primarily with entrepreneurial firms, small, mid-sized manufacturing and service companies. And out of that, started to really understand where their heads were at, the problems that they were facing as contrasted to our earlier clients, people like Kraft, Amoco, and the very large companies in the area. The books I've written, both the first book, The Failure of Marketing, and this book, are all directed at that early to middle market size company, in that these people are generally so concentrated on selling their product, they fail to miss the point, fail to understand the point that people aren't sold, they buy.
Well, you know, that is such a good point. And, you know, just on the ride down here to the studio today, how many times have you seen in a leadership team of a company that there's the president, there's the operations guy, and then there's the VP of sales and marketing? And that, to me, is always an indication of, wait a minute now, what's really going on here? Because usually that VP of sales and marketing is either what? All sales or maybe a little bit of marketing, and they just like to have that kind of title. But does that mean, again, they really aren't really thinking about some of the things that are critical to a marketing strategy? They're out there selling.
Oh, absolutely. And selling is an important part of a marketing strategy, particularly in the business-to-business world. But the marketing strategy has to be built on a basic goal and understanding of marketing, in that marketing is there to create and nurture customers. And you have to build your whole marketing approach on that basis of, how am I going to build my top line? And I'm going to build it by creating more customers and nurturing those customers to become better customers.
So let's get into the real tenets of the G-Point strategy. Is it based on research, or what are some of the real principles that allow people to get to that point of turning their organization into a growth machine? Where do they start?
Well, here's where they start, and the whole concept of the G-Point was based on a lot of experience that we've had over the almost 30 years that we've been working on this. There are a few limited, highly successful companies that just grow. And they grew all through this downturn. They're growing now. They grow faster than their competition. They throw out new product. Do you realize that out of every 100 new products that are introduced, 90% don't exist after 2 years? These companies have the exact opposite ratio. The wild success in new products, and they do it because they understand three basic points. First, they understand that marketing is about creating and nurturing customer relationships. Marketing is not about running ads. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's focused on the customer. Second point, they have an intimate understanding of who their customer is and the customer's values and aspirations and where they're trying to go.
Now, when you say understanding who their customer is, does this come from surveys, research, panels, getting them down, or just plain old talking and listening to folks and finding out what their needs are?
Well, what you find out is that in a company like Procter & Gamble, it comes from ethnography, it comes from panels, it comes from all that kind of stuff. But you don't have to do it that way. I mean, that's very expensive, and generally you start doing some focus groups and surveys which don't really get you where you need to go. The best way to do it is to sit down with your customers and talk to them one-on-one. But you're not talking to them about what you have to sell. You're talking to them about what's going on in your life. What are your problems? What's your biggest challenge? What's keeping you awake at night? So that you start to understand the shoes that they're walking in. And when you begin to understand those, what you're going to be able to do is say, hey, I can help that guy do this. I can help that guy do that.
Now, you're a skilled marketer, and you understand how both to pose the questions, how to listen effectively, how to break those things down into areas that can be acted upon. But the average entrepreneur or sales guy maybe doesn't have those skill sets. How does your G-Point help them, if they're not so good at this, understand how to take it step by step so that they not miss the real insights? Because again, sometimes people are busy talking, but they're not listening and getting the real insights that are the marketing nuggets that turn into new products or services that can make all the difference in profitability.
Well, that's an interesting point in that a salesperson, as a good friend of mine puts it, his sales training was to show up and throw up, and he'd be in, and here's my product and this is why it's great and that type of stuff. They're not trained so often to listen and to understand. And one of the areas we get into in the book is what attitude you have to take into a discussion. How do you listen? What are you looking for? What kind of questions should you be asking? You're not asking someone, well, why didn't you buy this great product? Don't you understand? You're trying to understand what that person's life is like. That person doesn't have the same values you do. They're not coming at it from the same point you are. They're coming at it from, what are my problems? What's ringing, causing my phone to ring? What are causing my fires? And you need to understand that. And it's not hard. It takes a while to flip into it, but it's kind of like learning to ice skate. Once you got it, you go.
Why don't you give us some examples? Now, again, I sometimes get a little bit perturbed when people use examples of big companies and very successful companies and big brands, because when you talk about people like P&G or Apple or Pepsi, people say, well, wait a minute now, come on, these guys got a big paycheck, they're very skilled at this, they've got the best of Madison Avenue, they've had it for a long time, they've made their flops, but they've got the kind of resources that allow them to come back and still be at the party. And then many times they've bought their way into real successful franchises because they recognize, hey, some of these new things we're developing, and they didn't think of them, but somebody else did, and they bought their way into some real fast-growing markets that they have. Talk about some maybe lesser-known, smaller, medium-sized guys that were able to, practice some of these principles and have the kind of success over and over again that turned their company into a growth company.
Okay, let me give you a tiny example.
Okay.
It was a startup company called Tetherfree.
All right.
And a fella came up with a great idea just at the time that Palm devices were being able to access wireless, so that they could, you'd be able to take a look at your Palm or the HP version of that and flip up a little antenna, and you'd be able to hook up onto the internet. And he said, well, this would be great because you have all these route salesmen, these guys going out and selling beer and food and stuff like that, where they call on maybe 30, 40 places a day. and they'll be able to enter the purchase right into their little computer, and it'll go right into the computer and all that type of stuff. And he created the initial programming for this and got it to work on a device, and actually had a sample put together. And then he went out to try and sell it and found out that those guys really didn't care.
Okay.
He'd solved the problem that didn't exist.
Okay.
Which a fair number of entrepreneurs that,
right, exactly.
that are in the same boat. And he came to me, and I said, well, this is a cool device, but maybe there are people who do have this problem. Let's go find out. And we did a tremendous amount of telephone calling and talking with people and showing him how to do it. And out of that developed a whole market that's since become Salesforce automation.
Wow. And
some of our first clients were just right here in the Chicago area. And the whole idea was, before I go in to call on Mr. Manufacturer where I'm selling my components, whatever, I can look, I can see what his past orders are, I can see right now where his shipment is, where our last meeting was, and all that kind of record. Go in, talk to him, have a great sales call, then I can come out and I can fill in all the stuff that I need to fill in, so my sales manager knows that I made that call, and here's what's concerning him, and here's what we need to do, and here's where we get kudos. Well, and sales managers went crazy for this, and
well, that's a great example. And if we unpack that a little bit, again, first of all, somebody had to have a conversation with somebody at a business and a personal level. So you backed him up a little bit. So instead of him running in the door saying, hey, I got the greatest widget you've ever seen, he started just having some dialogue about points of pain and what some of the strategies and opportunities are. And then when he maybe repackaged how he brought his solution back, it didn't sound like a widget. It sounded like an answer to somebody's prayers, because it was facing the areas of most concern to them.
Absolutely. That's just an excellent way of putting it, of understanding where your customer is and then repackaging what you have to meet their needs. And that's where it's an understanding of values and aspirations. And that's what happened in this case. Once he understood that there were a lot of sales managers out there who had Salesforce all over the country that needed information that resided back at headquarters, and that you had needs for all kinds of information that existed with these sales guys. We just need a quick communication link.
You know, this is so valuable, and one thing that I'm thinking about a lot is I see a lot of young companies that have very insightful concepts and products for services. And one of the biggest challenges I often hear they tell me is, they say, you know, Bruce, I could go to Boston, I could go to L.A., and I could get some business, but my hardest problem is getting people to even talk to me at some of these big companies here in Chicago. You know, I got capital, I got my product, my prototype is ready, but just getting a conversation with a guy so we can get to the table and talk about needs. You know, again, this is a very busy time. Many organizations have trimmed their headcount. People are doing 2 and 3 jobs and don't have the time to talk to people. So, you know, even getting a phone number, you know, some of these people have the, you know, the iron gate. You call the one number and you get a voice robot. You don't, well, how do you even get to talking to somebody? How do you overcome some of these things even to get to the point of having a business conversation so you can get to this points of pain and need?
Well, what we do is we don't go in with just a phone call. We start out with a letter. And the letter essentially says, hey, I'm developing something, but I need your input and your direction to make sure that what I'm developing is right. I want to come in and talk to you, but I don't want to come in and tell you what I'm doing. I'll be happy to. But what I'm interested in is how you run your day, how this happens, how that happens, things that problems that he might have that this new product is going to solve. So you're going in saying, hey, you're the expert. You're the information source up here. I need your help. And you find that a lot of people will love just spending a half hour, 45 minutes giving you some help.
Okay, well,
but you have to approach them that way.
Well, let's say that, okay, now we're in the door, we've got the insight, we're come back to our wood shop, and we're cobbling together our solution, and we're pretty excited about what we found, and we think that it's been justified in the marketplace. How do we begin to turn that now into the rest of what makes up a marketing strategy? You know, how do I communicate value? How do I put that in my value proposition? You know, how do I price it accordingly? You know, a lot of people feel very frustrated today that they're all caught up in what they think is the commoditization of their solution. And they say, you know, hey, wait a minute, I'm being kicked down the street for $5 and this thing is saving people thousands of dollars. Why can't I price this thing at a level to get the real value out of it before it seems to deflate right before my very eyes? How do people begin to, again, when you talk about a growth machine, how do they begin to extrapolate this value into the rest of what makes up a complete marketing concept?
Well, you asked about 6 questions in
right.
there.
I'm good at that.
Which is great. Which is great. But let's start out with how do you position your product? Mm-hmm. How do I put that across? And the first thing you have to understand is you got to go back to that customer and what the customer values and what their understanding is. And when you understand that well, gee, his problem is this, so what I need to do is say, hey, I solve your problem, and here's how I can do it. If you're, I mean, so many commercial messages, whether they're ads or on the internet or direct mail pieces or whatever, start with, this is what I've got. If I'm buying something, I don't care what you have. Mm-hmm. I care that I have a problem and I need a solution for it. So when you turn to me and say, you have this problem, I got the solution, and here's how it works. Mm-hmm. Then I'm open, I'm ready to listen. That's where you need to start, is with, once again, that understanding of the customer. And the growth machines, small, large, have this intimate understanding of their customers' values. Okay. The next thing you have to realize is your goal is to get customers. Customers create sales. Mm-hmm. It's the customer who makes that decision, not you. Mm-hmm. It's that customer who makes that decision, and your goal is to get a lot more guys making more decisions. So maybe what you need is to keep on understanding. You talk about commoditization. If your product is becoming a commodity, that was about what my first book was about. You have a failure in marketing because you haven't understood your customer, because your customer's needs have changed.
That's right. And if they left you back at the commodity stage, that means the values have moved down the road and you didn't move with them.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So you need to stay in touch. You need to keep on with that customer. You need to appreciate that your customer is much more important than your product.
Now I'm not want to catch right there, because this type of marketing consciousness that your book represents, are you seeing evidence that there is respect? You know, there was a time where if you walked into a company and said you were a marketer, you got rushed right in. They wanted to talk to you because people respected brand builders. They respected marketers. But it seemed like something happened where the engineers came in and the propeller heads came in and the money guys came in, and the marketing guys got pushed to the back room. Are we seeing a time where companies are being more respectful, that they're starting to recognize that they don't know what they don't know, and they want to talk to marketers again so that they can begin to have more value conversations with their customers and be in a better position?
That is such a great question. What's happening is really kind of amazing out there, in that in the C-suite ranks, there's a terrific realization that they need marketing, that they need to figure out how to build customer loyalty. And you talk to CEOs and say, what's your number one problem in the marketplace? It's loyalty. Mm-hmm. How do I build customer loyalty? At the same time, the tenure of a typical chief marketing officer is decreasing every year. And it's decreasing because too many marketing people, and pardon me, haven't got it. They just don't understand this. Basic principles. They're still out there trying, how can I get him to buy this? Mm-hmm. No. How can I go out there and solve his problem? That's what the question is. How can I turn him into a customer? And I'm not going to do it by shoving a product at him. At the C-suite level, particularly with the CEO in these mid-sized companies that have had such a tough 2 years here, those guys are looking for, how can I build my business? Mm-hmm. And that's what this is about. they bring in a marketing guy. I just dealt with a client not too long ago who let his marketing guy go, and I said, why? Why'd you let him go? He said, because every time I turned around, his answer was, oh, we need a brochure on that. I said, I don't need a brochure. I need customers. And a brochure isn't going to get me customers. So he was gone, and they're looking for a new guy who's going to understand marketing, who's going to understand how do I get them new customers.
Now, since you made that statement, we'll talk about how the world is minting people that have this kind of consciousness about the value of it. And when we look at young people today that are pursuing, you know, their MBA or their undergraduate degree, again, you know, you don't hear a lot of people talking about the marketing profession as something to be admired or upheld. You know, when I was in school, I read David Ogilvy's Confession of an Ad Man, and I just had it made up my mind that advertising was the greatest thing that ever been invented. And I thought that, you know, working in an agency or working in marketing was just, God, this is what life is all about. But it seems that, again, that's not the luster that it once was, and people either want to be, you know, techies or engineers or in some other profession, but marketing doesn't seem to be esteemed anymore. So as we're minting these people, is some of the fundamentals of what you're talking about, the importance of relationships. You know, in this time where we have social media, we have the internet, we have so many opportunities for people to engage, and it seems like the power is shifting to where the customer now does have a lot of power. And it seems that if marketers respect and appreciate that, they actually have a lot of power to get all of this kind of dialogue going on to create some real trust there. So I guess, Mike, again, unbundling that, are we teaching marketing in the right way, and are we minting new marketers in such a way that they can come in with these insights?
Well, there's a disconnect here, and there's a disconnect of what the C-suite wants, what the CEO wants, and there's a whole different thing that's coming out of graduate school. The education in marketing does a great job of serving basics, of getting down all the basics, and you can go through marketing textbook and they nail it, they got it. A little lengthy, but they got it.
Right.
But the problem is that then that young person comes into an organization where the marketing is probably being done the way it was done,
always done
30 years ago, and marketing is something that you can have the basics, but you got to learn it on the job. And what they learn on the job is the 30-year-old marketing. When I go in and talk to CEOs, bring them my book or bring them the points that I make in the book, they're turned around, they're ready to go. They understand it, they get it, because what we're talking about is business. We're talking about how to manage the top line. We're talking about how to build customer loyalty and what they need to do. And while they may not know exactly how to do it, they understand that what I'm talking about is going to get it done. Then they turn and say, well, where can I find a marketing guy to do this?
Okay.
And that's a bigger problem.
So then, you know, again, in this field, I remember, again, back in my early days of marketing, people like Ad Age and the different people used to have workshops and conferences and all kinds of things. There are a lot of ways to get the light bulb to come on and hear some of the new ideas by hearing speakers like yourself come out. We, of course, still have the AMA, and they're doing a lot of things. But in terms of marketing boot camps where people can get immersed in the kind of thinking that your book represents, how do people who are in the field and maybe want to be in the field connect with the kind of thinking that you're talking about? Okay, reading a book is one thing, but how they can have more practical, experiential side of getting some of these new tools under their belt where they feel like they could really go out and implement some of this stuff?
That's a tough question. It's an area that I've been thinking about doing, of putting together boot camps like that. In terms of getting the practical experience, you can do what I was told to do when I got out of graduate school. Go to work for Procter & Gamble, go to work for Apple, go to work for McDonald's, go to work for some of these other companies that are kind of in that top tier of growth machine. If you're in the business-to-business area, Illinois Toolworks right here in Chicago is brilliant at this, absolutely brilliant at this. Great place to work, and you're going to learn the basics. Coming out of there, though, you've got to understand those basics, and you have to go in and change a company that may be doing things that are 30 years old, that are ingrained, and you're going to have to say, hey, guys, this is how it has to be done. You're going to have the confidence. In terms of workshops, there are some blogs to follow. My blog, Seth Godin, David Meerman Scott, Charles Broden.
So these are new voices of the marketing community that are starting to get these concepts out there. People can follow them. So if you're passionate about marketing and you really believe that marketing has an important place at the business table, especially when it relates to growth and customer service, that your book, your voice, what you're putting out there, you're saying that marketing still has a lot of value. And you're saying that the big boss really understands that and is looking for people to bring these types of ideas and awareness to the table.
Absolutely. And on the blog site that I've just got up, I have a whole list of resources, of blogs to look at, of books to consider, of other speakers and other voices to pay attention to.
Okay, so what's that website that people can go to?
It's www.jacktrytten.com.
Okay, all right. All right. And your book again, what's the title of your book?
The G Point, How to Turn Your Company into a Growth Machine.
Okay, the G Point, How to Turn Your Company into a Growth Machine. And I guess that's pretty sexy too, huh? So they should want to do that, because who doesn't want their business growing as fast as it can grow, having all the customers that they can handle? And again, some people are doing it year in and year out. No matter what industry they're in, you know, they could be in steel or they can be in B2B, and they could just be growing in, you know, over and over again, having year in and year out growth. And there are companies that are doing it. They're in, you know, products like auto parts or aftermarket activities, but they're in consumer. But they're finding a way to do it is because they know a little bit about marketing that their other competitors don't really know. And I think Jack knows it, and he's been fortunate enough to share it with us. Jack, I want to thank you for being a guest on my show today, and look for his publication and look for his website on jacktrytten.com, and you can become that master marketer to make a difference in your business life, and I hope that you do. My name is Bruce Montgomery, and you've been watching another edition of Technology Access Television.